So last Tuesday, I had a patient, let's call him Greg, sit down across from me, cross his arms, and say, Doc, I stopped taking my statin 3 months ago because I read online that cholesterol is actually good for you, and the whole thing is a scam by pharma companies. And I just sat there for a second because Greg is not a dumb guy. Greg runs a logistics company. Greg manages 140 employees. But Greg also gets his cardiovascular advice from a guy on TikTok whose only qualification is a six-pack and a ring light.
And here's the thing, I'm not mad at Greg. I'm really not, because the information out there about cholesterol is so confusing, so contradictory, and so polluted with half-truths that honestly, I'd be confused too if I weren't doing this for 17 years. So today, I want to go through the cholesterol myths I hear the most, the ones that come up in my office almost every single week, and I want to break them apart with you. Not with jargon, not with a lecture, just the way I'd explain it if you and I were sitting in my office right now and you genuinely wanted to understand what's going on inside your arteries. Let's start with probably the biggest one. My cholesterol number is high, so I'm in trouble. My cholesterol number is normal, so I'm fine. This one drives me up the wall because it sounds so reasonable. You get your blood work back, you see a total cholesterol number, and you either panic or you celebrate. But here's what most people don't realize. Total cholesterol is almost meaningless on its own. I'm serious. It's like looking at the final score of a basketball game without knowing which team scored what. Total cholesterol is a sum. It bundles together your LDL, your HDL, some of your triglycerides, and a thing called VLDL, and it spits out one number. And that one number tells me shockingly little about your actual risk. I've had patients walk in with a total cholesterol of 230 who were in fantastic cardiovascular shape. And I've had patients with a total cholesterol of 190 who had significant plaque buildup already happening. How is that possible? Because what matters is the breakdown. What matters is how much of that total is LDL, the kind that can burrow into your artery walls and start building up, versus how much is HDL, which is essentially your cleanup crew. And even within LDL, it gets more nuanced than that. The size of those LDL particles matters. Having a lot of small, dense LDL particles is a very different risk profile than having fewer, larger ones. The small, dense ones are the ones that wedge themselves into the lining of your blood vessels and kick off inflammation. So when someone tells me my cholesterol is 180, I'm good, right? My answer is always, let me see the full panel first. And ideally, I want to see something called an advanced lipid panel, or a lipoprotein particle test, which actually counts the number and type of particles floating around in your blood. That's a much sharper picture than just one number on a piece of paper. Now, myth number 2, and this one is deeply personal for me because I've seen it go wrong. I feel perfectly fine, so my cholesterol can't be that bad. Let me tell you something about cholesterol that I wish everyone understood. It doesn't hurt. High cholesterol doesn't give you headaches. It doesn't make you tired. It doesn't make your chest feel funny. For most people, it produces 0 symptoms for years, sometimes decades. And that's exactly what makes it so dangerous. I think of cholesterol buildup like rust inside a pipe. You're not going to notice it from the outside. The water still flows, everything seems fine, until one day the pipe narrows enough or a chunk breaks off and clogs something downstream, and suddenly you've got a crisis. In the human body, that crisis is a heart attack or a stroke. And I've sat across from too many patients, people in their late 40s, early 50s, who told me the year before, I feel great, I don't need that blood test. Feeling great is wonderful. I want you to feel great. But feeling great is not a diagnostic tool. It never has been. There's a reason we call hypertension and high cholesterol silent killers. It's not a dramatic nickname for clickbait purposes. It's literally what they are. They work silently, beneath your awareness, for years, until the damage is significant enough to announce itself. And by the time it announces itself, you're in an emergency room, not a doctor's office. So please, even if you feel like $1,000,000, get your lipid panel checked. It's a simple blood draw. It takes 5 minutes, and it could genuinely save your life. The next one I hear constantly, and I mean constantly, eggs are bad for me because of cholesterol, right?
Okay, so this myth has had the longest, strangest journey of any nutrition myth I can think of. Back in the 1960s and 70s, the thinking was simple and, honestly, kind of lazy. Eggs have cholesterol, your blood has cholesterol, therefore eating eggs raises your blood cholesterol. It made intuitive sense. It was easy to put on a poster, and it was mostly wrong. Here's what we've learned since then. For the majority of people, and I mean roughly 70 to 75% of the population, dietary cholesterol, the cholesterol you eat in food, has a surprisingly modest effect on your blood cholesterol levels. Your liver is the main cholesterol factory in your body. It produces somewhere around 80% of the cholesterol circulating in your blood all on its own. When you eat more cholesterol, your liver typically compensates by producing less. It's a feedback loop. Now, there is a subset of people, sometimes called hyperresponders, whose blood cholesterol does react more dramatically to dietary cholesterol. For those individuals, yeah, going heavy on eggs every single day might nudge their numbers up in a way that matters. But for most people, having an egg a day, maybe even two, is perfectly fine and actually gives you a really solid nutritional package. High-quality protein, choline, B vitamins, selenium. The real dietary villain when it comes to raising your LDL isn't cholesterol in food, it's saturated fat and, to some extent, trans fat. Those are the things that actually tell your liver to ramp up LDL production. So if you're eating an egg fried in a tablespoon of butter alongside 4 strips of bacon and a white bread toast slathered in margarine, yeah, that meal is a problem. But it's not the egg's fault. It's the company the egg is keeping. Context matters in nutrition more than any single ingredient. All right, now here's one that I have a really complicated relationship with because I understand the emotion behind it. I don't want to take a statin. I'd rather do it naturally. I hear this from probably a third of my patients when we first have the cholesterol conversation. And I want to be really careful here because I don't want to dismiss anyone's desire to use lifestyle changes to manage their health. That desire is actually great. I love that desire. The problem is when naturally becomes a reason to refuse treatment you actually need. And when the word natural gets weaponized by the supplement industry to sell you things that are far less effective than what we're offering, and sometimes not effective at all. Let me give you the honest picture. Lifestyle changes, real ones, not half-hearted ones, can absolutely lower your LDL cholesterol. A genuinely heart-healthy diet, consistent aerobic exercise, weight loss if you're carrying extra weight, quitting smoking, these things work. Diet alone can drop your LDL by somewhere around 10 to 15% in most people. Sometimes up to 20 or 25% if you're really aggressive with it and starting from a lousy baseline. Exercise helps, though its biggest impact tends to be on raising HDL and lowering triglycerides rather than directly hammering down LDL. Now, a statin can lower your LDL by 30 to 50%. Some of the stronger ones at higher doses can push that even beyond 50%. So if you're someone whose LDL is mildly elevated and whose overall cardiovascular risk is low, sure, let's absolutely try lifestyle first. I do that all the time. I give patients 3 to 6 months to make real changes. We recheck the numbers, and if they've gotten things into a reasonable range, fantastic. No medication needed. But if you're someone whose LDL is significantly elevated, or you've already got other risk factors stacking up, family history, diabetes, high blood pressure, smoking history, then asking lifestyle alone to do the heavy lifting is like trying to bail out a flooding basement with a coffee mug. It's effort in the right direction, but it's not going to be enough. And every month that passes with your LDL way above where it should be is another month of plaque quietly building up inside your arteries. That's time you can't get back. As for supplements, red yeast rice is the one that comes up the most. And here's the funny thing about red yeast rice. The reason it works at all, when it works, is because it contains a compound called monocolin K, which is chemically identical to lovastatin, which is a statin. So when someone tells me, I don't want a statin, I'll take red yeast rice, they're often literally taking a statin, just an unregulated one, with inconsistent dosing, no quality control, and none of the safety monitoring that comes with a prescription. That's not smarter, that's just more expensive and less safe. And this feels like a good moment to pause and say, if you've heard any of these myths before, or if you've believed any of them, Do me a favor and drop a comment below telling me which one surprised you the most. Seriously, I read every comment and it helps me understand what's confusing people out there so I can make better videos for you. Also, if you're watching this and thinking about someone in your life who needs to hear this, a spouse, a parent, a friend who's been refusing their medication, send them this video. Sometimes hearing it from a different voice makes all the difference. Okay, moving on. The next myth is one that genuinely frustrates me because it affects a specific group of people who think they're immune. I'm thin, so cholesterol isn't my problem. This is so widespread and it's so wrong. Body weight and cholesterol are related, sure, but they are not the same thing. I've had marathon runners sitting in my office with an LDL north of 160. I've had women who wear a size 4 and eat salads every day whose lipid panels looked like they'd been eating fast food for a decade. Why? Because a huge chunk of your cholesterol profile is genetically determined. Your liver's production of cholesterol, the efficiency of your LDL receptors, which are the little docking stations on your cells that pull LDL out of your bloodstream, these things are largely set by your DNA. There's a condition called familial hypercholesterolemia that affects roughly 1 in every 250 people. And these individuals can have dangerously high LDL levels regardless of how clean their diet is or how often they exercise. Many of them are thin. Many of them look like the picture of health from the outside. But inside their arteries, the damage is accumulating. So please, whether you're thin or heavy, whether you work out 5 days a week or you haven't seen a gym since 2015, get your numbers checked. Cholesterol doesn't care about your pants size. Here's another one that I hear a version of almost every day. My doctor put me on a statin and now I have muscle pain, so statins are destroying my body. Okay, let's unpack this one carefully because there's real science here that gets buried under a mountain of internet hysteria. First, yes, statins can cause muscle aches. This is a real side effect. It's called myalgia in medical terms, and studies suggest it affects somewhere around 5 to 10% of people who take statins. That's a real number. I don't dismiss it. If a patient tells me their legs are aching since they started a statin, I take that seriously. We might try lowering the dose, switching to a different statin because there are several and they're not all the same, or changing the dosing schedule. There are options. What I don't do is say, well, statins are dangerous, you should stop all treatment and just eat more fish. But here's the part that might surprise you. There's been some really fascinating research on the nocebo effect with statins. The nocebo effect is the opposite of the placebo effect. It's when you expect a negative side effect, so you experience one, even if the drug itself isn't causing it. Several large, well-designed studies have done something clever. They gave patients either a statin or a sugar pill, and they didn't tell them which one they were getting. And the rates of reported muscle pain were nearly identical in both groups. Nearly identical. That suggests that a significant portion of the muscle complaints people attribute to statins may actually be driven by expectation rather than by the drug itself. Now, I am not saying that everyone who reports statin side effects is imagining things. Absolutely not. Real side effects exist. In very rare cases, we're talking about 1 in 10,000, roughly, statins can cause a more serious muscle condition called rhabdomyolysis, which is genuine muscle breakdown. That's rare, it's serious, and it's something we monitor for. But the gap between statins occasionally cause muscle aches and statins are destroying your body is enormous. And the internet has filled that gap with fear. The reality is that statins are one of the most studied classes of medication in the history of medicine. We have data going back decades across hundreds of thousands of patients, showing significant reductions in heart attacks, strokes, and cardiovascular death. Are they perfect? No. Do they have side effects? Some people, yes. But the risk-benefit math for people who genuinely need them is overwhelmingly in favor of taking them. And I say this as someone who doesn't enjoy putting people on medications. I'd love it if everyone could manage everything with broccoli and jogging. But that's not the world we live in. Let's talk about another one that's been gaining a lot of traction online recently. Cholesterol doesn't actually cause heart disease. It's all about inflammation. This is a sneaky myth because it's built on a half-truth. Inflammation absolutely plays a central role in cardiovascular disease. That part is correct. Atherosclerosis, the buildup of plaque in your arteries, is fundamentally an inflammatory process. When LDL particles get trapped in the artery wall, your immune system responds by sending white blood cells to the area. Those cells gobble up the oxidized LDL and become foam cells. The area becomes inflamed, fibrous caps form, and over time, you get a plaque that can rupture and cause a heart attack. Inflammation is deeply involved in every step of that process. But, and this is the key part, you need the LDL there in the first place for the process to get started. Think of it this way. Inflammation is the match, but LDL is the gasoline. If you dump gasoline all over your floor but never light a match, you probably won't have a fire. But you're living in an insanely dangerous situation. And if you light a match in a room with no gasoline, you'll probably be fine. The problem is when both are present. And in the real world, in most people's bodies, both are present to some degree. Decades of research, Mendelian randomization studies, massive randomized controlled trials, epidemiological data from millions of people, all converge on the same conclusion. LDL cholesterol is a causal factor in atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. Not just correlated with it, causal. The evidence for this is about as strong as the evidence that smoking causes lung cancer. So when someone on a podcast says, cholesterol is innocent, it's all inflammation, they're either misunderstanding the science or deliberately ignoring it to sell you their anti-inflammatory supplement line. Usually both. Now, there is a conversation worth having about inflammation markers, things like C-reactive protein, homocysteine, lipoprotein AA, as additional tools for assessing your cardiovascular risk beyond just standard lipid panels. And that conversation is legitimate and important. But it's an in addition to conversation, not an instead of conversation. You don't get to ignore your LDL just because you also care about inflammation. They're both part of the picture. Let's keep going because there's one more that I hear a lot from a very specific type of patient. And I say this with love. It's usually the person who's just gotten really into keto or carnivore eating. My LDL went up on this diet, but my HDL went up too, so it all balances out. It doesn't. I understand the logic, and it's appealing because it's simple arithmetic. One went up, the other went up, net effect 0. But that's not how cardiovascular risk works. HDL is important, yes. Higher HDL has been associated with lower cardiovascular risk in observational studies. But, and this was a big surprise to the medical community about a decade ago, when researchers tried to develop drugs that specifically raised HDL levels, those drugs didn't reduce heart attacks or strokes. They raised the number, but the number alone didn't translate into protection. This suggested that HDL is more of a marker than a direct lever. It tells you something about your metabolism, but artificially pushing it up doesn't necessarily buy you safety. Meanwhile, LDL's relationship with heart disease is direct and causal. More LDL in your blood over time means more plaque, means more risk, period. So if your diet has pushed your LDL from 110 to 180, the fact that your HDL also went from 50 to 70 does not cancel that out. You've gained a little in one column and lost a lot in another. And the column you lost in is the one that's most likely to send you to the cath lab. I'm not here to tell anyone what to eat. If keto or carnivore makes you feel better, gives you energy, helps you maintain a healthy weight, there are things about those approaches that have real value. But you need to monitor your lipids carefully. And if your LDL is climbing significantly, you need to have an honest conversation with your doctor about what that means for your long-term risk, rather than dismissing it because a podcast host told you LDL doesn't matter. Here's one more, and I saved it for near the end because I think it's the most practically important. Once I start a statin, I'm on it for life. There's no going back. This stops a lot of people from even trying medication, and I get it. The idea of being chained to a pill for the rest of your life feels heavy. It feels like giving up. But the reality is more nuanced than that. Some people do need to be on a statin long term. If you have a strong genetic component, if you've already had a cardiovascular event, if your risk factors are deeply rooted, then yes, long-term therapy is probably the plan. But for other patients, especially those who are willing to make and sustain serious lifestyle changes, it's absolutely possible to try a period without the medication down the road and see how your numbers look. I've had patients who started a statin, used it as a bridge while they overhauled their diet, lost 30 or 40 pounds, got into a consistent exercise routine, and after a year or two, we tapered off the statin and their numbers held. It can happen. It does happen. The key is that it has to be a conversation with your doctor based on data, not a unilateral decision you make in your bathroom after watching a scary YouTube video. You don't just stop a statin cold turkey because someone on the internet told you it's poison. You talk to your doctor, you check your numbers, you assess your overall risk, and you make a joint decision. That's how good medicine works. It's collaborative. It's not me dictating to you, and it's not you Googling yourself into a panic and acting alone. Let me wrap this up with something that I think ties all of this together. The reason cholesterol myths are so persistent and the reason they spread so effectively is that cholesterol is complicated. It's not black and white. It's not a simple story of good and evil. And when something is complicated, people crave simple answers. They want to hear eggs are bad or eggs are fine. They want to hear statins are poison or statins are magic. They want one rule they can follow and never think about it again. But your body doesn't work that way. Your cardiovascular system is a living, dynamic, incredibly complex thing. What's right for your neighbor might not be right for you. What was true about your numbers 5 years ago might not be true today. And the only way to navigate that complexity is to work with someone who understands it. A doctor, a cardiologist, a well-trained nurse practitioner, and to stay engaged with your own health data over time. Not once, not when something goes wrong, regularly, proactively. The way you'd maintain a car you plan to drive for another 40 years. I want you to be informed. I want you to ask questions. I want you to push back on your doctor if something doesn't make sense. But I also want you to push back on the internet with the same energy. Because right now, the internet is winning that battle in a lot of people's lives, and it's not winning in a good way. The loudest voices online are not always the most qualified. The most shared posts are not always the most accurate. And the algorithms that decide what you see don't care about your health. They care about your clicks. You deserve better than that. You deserve to understand what's happening in your body, why your doctor is recommending what they're recommending, and what you can actually do about it. And that's what I'm here for, every week, on this channel. No agenda, no sponsors telling me what to say, just a doctor who's been in the room with patients for almost 2 decades and wants to share what he's learned. If this video helped you, subscribe. It genuinely helps the channel grow and lets me keep making these for free. Hit the notification bell if you want to know when the next one drops. And seriously, leave me a comment. Tell me the myth you used to believe or the one you're still not sure about. I will respond. I always do. Take care of yourselves. I'll see you in the next one.